Then it says in verse 15, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. Now, that tells us that man was created to work. Okay? And that's one of the things when people talk about, I get all kinds of emails, people asking questions about this and that, life and what should I be doing and everything. Well, right here it says that we're to be out and work. And it'll say that, it'll break it down a little bit more later. But anyway, he was to tend and keep it. Man was to be about his business. He was to be doing something even in the Garden of Eden. And so that gives me hope that we're not going to be sitting on clouds playing harps. You know what I mean? We'll have something to do, and it'll be something that the Lord knows will keep us going for eternity. Anyway, one thing about those two particular words, and I will not say that this is certain because I haven't checked it out myself, but this was from my Hebrew and Aramaic teacher in college. And he's a very reliable person, and he obviously knows these words very well, but he said that both of these words can actually be translated a different way. Okay? And it almost makes sense, taking this in context, is that if you were to, words will have many more than one meaning, and we talked about that a while ago, how people will go through Strong's and they'll just pick out words and say, well, let's put this here and put this here, even though it has nothing to do with the context, and that's because it fits their preconceived notions about life or whatever. But these two words apparently, I'm not dogmatic about this, but this is what I was told, is that can be translated as to worship and praise. Oh. So here they are, and that would make sense, is that as a matter of fact, he said that some translators have actually used that in their translation. Now, I can't say that's true because I haven't done the study myself, but he did say that, and that would make a huge amount of sense, is because what are they supposed to be doing in the Garden of Eden? They're supposed to be fellowshipping with God. He had intimate relationships with Him, and they're supposed to be worshiping and praising Him. Now, whether that's correct or not, I don't know. I just wanted you to know that just for the sake of, and maybe I'll go home and check that out today. I could do it right now, but it would take a couple minutes, and I don't want you to sit here and watch me go through Strong's and through the Hebrew Bible here. But anyway, I thought that was very interesting that he said that. So, and I don't know why he brought that up, because we didn't study this particular passage. Maybe it was in connection with something else. But all right, so verse 16. I'll just keep going after 16 too.
And the Lord God commanded the man, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat of it, you will surely die. Okay, now here's the big question that I like to ask myself and you as well. Did Adam have any idea what it meant to die? Do you think he had any comprehension? You have to go back and you have to think about when he was created. He was created out of the dust, and God breathed into him, and he became a man. And what did he think? I mean, he was a fully functioning, fully reasoning person. What did he think when he was suddenly made? He didn't have a previous day.
I thought he always was.
Exactly. It's just hard to even conceive what went on in his mind. And then God had to tell him, I created you, and you weren't here a second ago, and now you are, and I'm going to start having you do stuff. And just the thought process of going on in his head when he wakes up and here he is.
Well, death probably didn't exist.
That's what I'm saying. He had no idea of this. Okay?
But he was commanded.
He was commanded not to. Okay, he was given one command, and it was in the negative as far as losing Eden. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is that he did do that. He did the thing that he was told not to. Did he have a knowledge that he shouldn't do that? Other than the Lord commanding him. Did he have a knowledge?
You mean the knowledge of the death, of death?
That of death, but also of...
knowledge that he shouldn't do it, yeah.
But what type of knowledge is that? And the reason I'm asking you to think this through.
It's got no context.
He's got no context. He hasn't eaten of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So he doesn't know that it's wrong to disobey the Lord. Do you see what I'm saying? He doesn't have any comprehension of that. All he knows is that the Lord told him not to do this thing. But he doesn't understand that it's wrong. Now, let me ask, what's that?
Free choice.
Free choice. That's exactly right. And in exercising our free choice, here's Charlie Garrett, and I'm going down Bee Ridge Road, okay, which I do a couple times a week, and I'm going 52 miles an hour, right? I turn off of Grace and I go this way. It's the first time I've ever been on Bee Ridge Road, right? The speed limit sign here is 45. Did I see the speed limit sign? No. I'm going 52. Am I susceptible to get a ticket?
Yes.
Why? I didn't know the speed limit was 45.
But even if it hadn't been.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Do you think that the framers of our Constitution didn't understand this? Of course they did. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, and human beings have known this forever. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. You're told not to do it by the one that just brought you to existence. Right? Do you see? I mean, I want you to think through, because people have such a problem with this, and they come up with arguments as to why God isn't good. And why it doesn't make any difference what we think. It makes no difference at all what we think. What matters is that God said something, that He created Adam. It doesn't matter if He knew what death was. He says, you're going to die. Well, it wasn't so bad. He didn't even know what it was like before he was alive, so how could he know what it was like after being dead? It was okay. I wasn't here, but there was no concept of it. It doesn't make any difference. I was going 52. The cop pulled me over and gave me a ticket. And this is his ticket. He's told, don't do this thing. Even if he didn't have any idea about good and evil, or if he didn't have any idea, he had free will. Exactly what Tom said. Exactly. Free will, but go ahead.
That would have been the reason why he would have tried to talk Eve out of it. When she...
Yeah, he doesn't know. He said, don't do it. And she's like, why? You know, the whole argument is, that's exactly right. It makes no difference, though, whether ignorance of the law is no excuse. Now, having said that, this is why, this particular, what we're talking about right now, is why I don't believe in Calvinism, when Calvinism says that free will does not play a part in, that we have no choice in our salvation. And I've given this example in the class before. Some Calvinists will talk about, here's a river, and there's a little duck here, okay, and there's another little, I know these are really pathetic ducks, but here's some little ducks here, and God, according to them, just pulls out a duck and lets the rest of them go down the river. This is God sovereignly choosing the ducks, okay, that will be saved. And that is basically what Calvinism says. Now, hyper-Calvinism, or double predestination it's called, says that God chooses this duck and then He pushes this one on down to hell. He actively participates in sending people to hell. Exactly. But if you think about it, if you think about Calvinism, says, I'm taking this duck out, and He created the water and He created that duck, it's still the same thing. Calvinism and hyper-Calvinism say the same thing. God is just doing it. He's just being a little nicer and not actually pushing them down the river. But it's the same thing. So they say, I don't believe in double predestination. By default, they do. Okay? What does it say? They use about 10 verses to justify, maybe not even that, maybe 4 verses to justify their stand that we don't have free will. How many verses say that we exercise our free will in salvation? Dozens and dozens and dozens. John 3:16. Go ahead and just quote it. For God
So loved this world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believe in Him.
believes. Active on our part, right? If you do what? You shall be saved. If you...
Believe.
Well, no. Romans 10:9. For all who confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, you shall be saved. For all who call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. And there are verse after verse after verse. And Paul says, the moment you believe, you receive. Misquote, but Ephesians 1:13, right? This is saying that we actively participate. And the reason why I'm bringing that particular thing up is because what we're reading right here. If you take it back logically, here's Charlie Garrett, here's my dad, and you just keep going back, eventually we get back to some guy with a beard, in Israel, and then you keep going back, and eventually you get to Adam, this guy that came out of the dust, right? I didn't choose God here. My dad had no choice in the matter here. This guy had no choice here. What is it saying about Adam? Think it through logically. What is it saying about Adam if, in fact, I don't choose for Jesus Christ?
Says that He didn't have a choice.
He had no choice, and God actively made him fall. And that is ascribing evil to God. All right? So what is R.C. Sproul? This is the guy that I bring up every single week. I read. Do you know who R.C. Sproul is? Okay, I read him every morning, Table Talk magazine. He's in the middle of State Sanford, and he's got St. Andrew's Chapel, I think is what it's called. And he's a very smart guy. And he does have some good points, but he's a preterist and he's also a Calvinist, and he beats this one to death, but he comes up every once in a while with a sermon or one of his talks, and he comes up with the question, and he brings it up again and again. Over the past 5-8 years, I've heard him say it, I can't tell you how many times. Whence came evil? He can't answer that question because of his theology. He says, God doesn't do evil. And God created man, and man committed evil. Well, then where does evil come from? And here's his logic. He says, if evil is intent, and Jesus proves it is, if you look at a woman with lust in your eyes, then you've committed adultery with her already. If evil is intent, and here's this luscious tree with these fruit on it, right? And he says, evil is intent, and he says, ooh, there's fruit, and I'm going to eat it. Then he fell before the fall. Because of his mind. That is R.C. Sproul's problem. Because he cannot believe that free will is involved in here. And free will, as I said, does not negate, innocence does not negate free will. And free will allows us to make the decision even though we're in innocence and we had no idea what we were doing. Right? Go ahead.
You also can't express love if you don't have free will.
Absolutely. I don't understand how people can... That's absolutely right. How can we praise God? How can we, for the ages, Ephesians 2:7 that I brought up here, says for the ages to come, we're going to be praising Him, right? How can we do that if we don't have free will to do it? If we didn't know where we came from and all of this active participation on our part. God has sovereignly allowed us to do this. Now, Tom next door asked for something. He heard Pastor Dave say something one time, and he couldn't remember what it was, but he wanted to know, how do you justify predestination from our viewpoint? He said, I heard Pastor Dave say something in a sermon one time, and I want to get the information. I said, I'll email him. So I gave it to him yesterday, and here's what Pastor Dave said. It says here, when you're walking up to the gates of heaven, it says, all whosoever will come, right? And then when you get through the gate, you turn around and it says, I chose you from before I'm going to misquote the verse. Foundations of the earth, thank you. All right? That's what's going on. He knew what choice we would make, but we have to make the choice. That is, what R.C. Sproul says is simply wrong. I don't mean to beat the guy over the head, but sometimes I listen to him. I get his tape every month because I get his Table Talk magazine. I get a free thing, and we put it in there, and I end up yelling at my radio every single month. He beats us to death. He can't get past this because he doesn't understand that innocence doesn't negate guilt. But that's what it is. And if you say that to him, he'll say, well, no, I disagree with that, and here's why. And he takes these 2 or 3 verses. We'll go to one right now, just so that we can get this out of the way. What is it that it says, there is none righteous, no, not one, there is none who does good? Okay, that's Romans, where is that? Romans 3, somewhere right in there. That might be right. 3, we're going to go there. I'm in Romans 3 here. Yes, exactly. Thank you. Very good. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is none who understands. Here's the verse he quotes, the next one. This is what he quotes every single time. There is none who seeks after God. Okay? Where does that come from? Don't look on your notes. Think it through. Where does that come from? Without looking at your little thing. There is none who seeks after God. Where does that come from? It comes from the Psalms. All right? And what is it in context with? This is what I would have to ask R.C. Sproul. Go to Psalm 14. I'm sure this is the one. Psalm 14:1. I'm sure of it because it repeats it twice in the Psalms. And the second one is in Psalm 35:1. But go to Psalm 14 and I'm sure it's the first verse.
The fool says in his heart there is no God.
Absolutely. And then read the next verse.
They are corrupt, their deeds are vile, and there is no one who does good.
Absolutely. Who is he talking about? The atheist. The fool says in his heart there is no God. If you take that verse in its context, here's what R.C. Sproul says. He quotes this one right here from Romans. It says, there is none who seeks after God. And he says that is universal. That's what he says. And because it's universal, we cannot choose good on our own. There is nothing good in us at all. And that's what he says. And here is my response to him. And I've asked this in the class and I have never heard a negative answer. Are Muslims seeking after God? Yes. They're doing it wrong, but they're seeking after God. Do Jehovah's Witnesses seek after God? Yes, they're just doing it wrong. Misdirected faith is wasted faith.